Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting. This is the first public meeting of the Emergency Services Grant Program Advisory Committee. We are going to do a call to order and start with some introductions of every member of the group. And let me just change my view real quick to see if I can get everybody. There we go. Okay, I'm also watching the meeting on my iPad to make sure it's following along. So tonight, this is our first meeting. I'm going to ask, I'll call off members that are present tonight and just ask you to please introduce yourself and let the public know which position you were assigned to and a few words about yourself. Let's go ahead and start with Kate, if you would go ahead.
Bumbly mouse, sorry. I'm Kate Beasley. I am the executive director of the Boulder Climbing Community, and I am the recreation representative for this group.
Great, thanks. Let's go to Juliet.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Juliet. I am a member at large for this committee, but I do volunteer with the Boulder Emergency Squad and responding all over the county alongside fire districts and other search and rescue agencies. So I'm deeply familiar with the land of emergency services within the county. And I do strategy consulting for a living. So I'm used to reviewing proposals, strategies, make recommendations, and I'm hoping to put those two worlds together and contributing to this committee.
Thank you so much. Ben, would you like to go next?
Hi there. My name is Ben Hogan, and I'm appointed as the Search and Rescue representative on this committee. I volunteer with the Sunshine Fire Protection District, do wildland and medical response, and I'm also part of a volunteer ski patrol that operates here in Boulder County. So I have experience with rescue services in the county through both of those. And in my day job, my salary is funded through grants that I write. I review my peers' grants and figure out how to best spend taxpayer money. So the combination of those two things here has brought me to this committee.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Doug, do you want to go next?
And my name is Doug Hurst. I'm a member. I am an at-large. My experience is I've just been in the fire service for roughly 15 years. Majority of it's been at the city of Lafayette.
Great. Doris?
Hi, my name is Doris Ragoni. I'm the representative for the Rural East Fire Protection District. In my day job, I am managing director for a financial services firm.
Great, thanks so much. Rick?
Hi, my name is Rick Spangold. I live in rural West Boulder County. I am a nationally certified first responder and a wildland firefighter. If you call 911 in Gold Hill, I'm probably who's going to show up. I'm on the committee as a former member of an FPD, Fire Protection District.
Great, thanks so much. And Dennis?
Hi, I'm Dennis Whalen. I am a member representing the Rural Fire Protection District. I am represented by a Rural Fire Protection District. I was a volunteer firefighter with Nederland for 4 years and Timberline Fire for 11 years. I retired from Timberline as their medical officer. And before all that, I did mountain rescue for 10 years. And that's enough.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much. I think it's pretty obvious we have some amazing experience and talent and outside, financial help, grants, writing, all that kind of stuff that'll really come into play here. And just the subject matter experts, I'm really pleased we have the group that we have here. There are two members who have been appointed to the board, both Lynette Anderson and Maria Kuntz. who could not make the meeting tonight, but they will be, since this meeting is being recorded, they will be watching this meeting after the fact so they can catch up with what they missed tonight. So normally we have 9 members. Tonight we have 7 representing, and we'll go from there. So I wanted to just make a few introductory remarks to get us into the meeting tonight. One, again, is to recap the agenda, and I can put that up there real quickly one more time. We've already done the call to order. These are my remarks. The next order of business will be to select the chair and the vice chair. That position will serve for the remainder of this year and all of next year. So those positions will be up again in the beginning of 2025. Then the big item of discussion for this evening is looking at a strategy for how to review the grant applications that we'll be looking at for the next 2 meetings. And then if we can at least select the initial 2024 meeting dates just to get us back together. And after that, that will conclude the official business for tonight. So I wanted to just, let's see, fill everybody in on a few things. For anybody who might be attending, we will be taking written questions that won't be addressed live at tonight's meeting. But if you do want to ask a question or make a remark about tonight's meeting, anything that is submitted through the Q&A feature in Zoom will be shared after the meeting with all the committee members. It's our general policy that we allow the committee to actually do its business here in the public view, but that tonight's meeting is not going to be one where we do Q&A with members who are attending. But again, if there's anything that comes up or something that wasn't clear, feel free to put that in the form of a question, and we will review that and come back and address those questions in another way, either at the next meeting or I can, put them up on the answers up on the website. But please know that we will look very carefully at any questions that are raised tonight. Just in terms of a timeline, this is the first meeting of this group to get together. But we had an informal just sort of meet and greet prior to this, but this is our first official business meeting. We will the deadline for the first grant cycle ends this Thursday at 4 p.m. And the first set of grants is open to fire districts, both in the mountains and in the plains or the flats. When we talk about the East County, we're talking about the flats. When we talk about the West County, we're talking about the mountains, just kind of in general. So those those applications will be coming to me on on Thursday. I will be collecting all of those and putting together packages that will be sent out to the committee members on Friday. So based on what you all decide is sort of the review criteria tonight, we'll be looking at those grants on your own during the Thanksgiving week. And then we will come back in 2 weeks on November 28th for the first meeting to review the grants. And then we have a second meeting scheduled for December 12th to finalize those grants. It could be that, we're able to do everything in one meeting, but we have 2 meetings just to make sure we have the time. Because at this time, we don't know how many grants applications we're going to be looking at. And we don't know ultimately how long the review part's going to take as a committee. But you'll get all that information at the end of the week. And then if the public wants to come back and watch as you review those, that'll be in 2 weeks. And all of this information is on the website at bouldercounty.gov. So with that, I think we'll move into the next item of business, which is to select a chair and a vice chair for this committee. The chair and vice chair will serve through this year in 2024. And there are specific roles that each one plays, but essentially the chair runs the meetings and the vice chair fills in if the chair is unavailable. And then there are a couple minor roles that each one plays individually. So if anybody would like to nominate a member, nominate yourself or nominate another member of the committee, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll entertain that. Rick?
I'd like to nominate Dennis as chair and Benjamin as the vice chair.
Okay, so we have on the table a nomination for the chair in Dennis Whalen and vice chair Ben Hogan. Anybody else wish to nominate another member? Okay, we do have quorum. Our group is 9, but the quorum is 5, so we have 7 members here tonight. All in favor of of electing Dennis Whalen as chair and Ben Hogan as vice chair, please say aye.
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 Raise
Aye.
your hand. Anybody opposed? Hearing none. That was easy. We have a new chair and vice chair. Thank you both for stepping into those roles. Do you want to say a few words, Dennis, as the chair?
Thank you for your faith in me. I hope I fulfill it.
Okay. We all do too. And Ben?
Yeah, same thing. Excited to see what this committee will do over the next few years.
Great, great. Well, glad to have you both step up into that position. It's really great. And tonight we're going to do sort of a hybrid where Dennis, I'm turning the official business of the meeting over to you to proceed. But I'm here to help in any way I can. The order of business is to figure out as a committee how you want to go about evaluating the applications that you'll get. And one of the things that I think that we want to accomplish tonight is generally a fair and consistent process for how to do that. I do have some information that I haven't been able to share with you yet, and that is that we will have roughly $1.7 million in this grant round. That is money that after we have a number of commitments that come out of the emergency services sales and use tax. Once those commitments are made, then we have money available for the grant program. So for this first grant cycle and for 2023, that amount is 1.7 million. Now, as you do your at-home rankings, we should probably spend the first cut at all of the rankings and ratings sort of blind to the money amount. That applications will be judged more on the content and whether they align with the criteria that you choose, and that has already been chosen. The county commissioners and the Boulder County Sheriff got together prior to this meeting and decided on basic criteria that was built into the grant application. So the fire districts were given instructions, guidelines, and all that to make sure that they know kind of how this first round is going to go. And all that again is on the website. I do know that we do have one sizable request for $1 million. And that was discussed in advance with me. And the reason it was discussed in advance is because it's being offered forward by the Boulder County Firefighters Association to provide radios to all of the rural and mountain fire districts, radios that would communicate with each other regardless of the terrain, regardless of the size of the district, the location. And this was really one of the priorities that came out of the Marshall Fire is when the volunteer organizations were asked to come in and help assist the urban firefighting efforts on Marshall Fire down in the flats. It was pretty clear that the mountain districts don't have the same radios or the same frequency, primarily because, and you all know this better than anybody, radios react differently based on terrain. So you don't want to necessarily have the same channel if you're in the mountains as you're on the flats. But what that means is that it's harder to collaborate when you have something that scales up or down in elevation. So one of the main priorities that was identified not by the county, but by the fire districts when this tax was being proposed, was to create communications that everybody could use, and that could be flexible enough that any agency could be on the same frequency as another one. So that I just wanted to preface with that is kind of a request that is unique in that it is meant to cover all of the fire districts and not just a single fire district asking for a request. Doug, do you have a question?
Yeah, will the Boulder County Communication Center maintain and operate those radios, or how will that?
That's a good question. And I'll do more research on it, but from my understanding is that the infrastructure that is required in the mountains particularly will be owned and maintained by the county, but that the actual radios will go to the fire districts. And I don't know whether they can go in trucks. I'm going to have to rely on the subject matter experts when we actually get that grant in. But essentially, the idea is that the fire districts would own the equipment, but the ability for the county to communicate back and forth will also fit into that. That expense would be on the county, but we would make sure that we also can accommodate the various channels that you might use, is my understanding. There was a sizable request in the 2024 budget by the sheriff that was not approved going forward for repeaters, towers, equipment that we are going to try to pursue through other areas, potentially a different part of this tax. But anything that's sort of generally used would be owned and operated by the county. Go ahead, Ben.
I can speak a little bit to some of the comms guy for my department. So in the mountains, we use VHF radios, which work well in the mountainous terrain. And then in the flats, like Doug, you guys use 800 megahertz, and you're probably more familiar with those radios than I am and can talk about how those work. But the county has 3 VHF repeaters located strategically throughout the county. And the difference in those frequency bands is that you can't have one radio or the current radios that the mountain agencies have, the VHF radios, cannot be programmed to 800 megahertz. They just don't have the internal electronic capability. So you need a new radio, and those radios are expensive. So the goal is to get dual band radios that can operate on both the 800 megahertz and VHF frequencies, so that the mountain departments can continue to use the existing VHF infrastructure for comms. But then when you have large scale incidents like Marshall, Sunshine Fire, and departments start coming together to respond, they can then talk to each other on 800 megahertz or VHF, whatever's appropriate for the incident. So I think, just to Doug's point, I think that programming and operating of those radios, I think they'll be handheld, will be fall under responsibility of the districts that are receiving the radio equipment. I'm not sure. Scott Whitehead is the comms guy for the county. He might do an initial program setup of some of the frequencies and then distribute them, but then maintenance might be assigned to the county. I think that there might be some more specifics in that grant when that comes up, but that's just a couple more tidbits on that.
If so much for that. Does anybody else have anything to add along those lines? And those are all really good questions, because I think that the full cost, if the association had wanted to put in the full cost that included the radio costs, the programming, the training, the maintenance, it was going to be closer to 2 million. And knowing that we don't have that money available. They scaled it back, and I don't know exactly how that's what's gonna be taken out in order for them not to exceed that, $1 million mark. So that's one thing we'll have to look at closely and discuss as a committee as to whether that full request that they have is going to be enough incentive for the districts to be able to really embrace, the use of these radios and not feel like it's a burden on them to maintain if the county can't do it. So I'll thank you for that background. I'll do some research about that in terms of training and getting them set up and then maintaining them and who that would fall on. Beyond that, again, what we get is going to be, we'll find out more on Thursday. So that's all I have for sort of an opening remark. Now I think it's time for us to each switch to the document that I provided by email to you. I borrowed this off of a recent, we just recently had to give away money from the sale of the Denver Broncos. We got about $1 million to give out to youth sports activities. And that committee decided to have sort of a series of yes or no questions that sort of defined whether basically a grant met the minimum standards, and then a few ranking questions that then decide that each member would assign to sort of get an idea about the low, medium, or high interest in seeing that application considered. So Dennis, maybe I can kick this off to you. And again, it's kind of hard to do this online, but if everybody has that document open, we can start with whether it's appropriate to have some yes, no questions, or unsure can also be a response. These were taken from the grant applications, so there's nothing in here that conflicts with the actual application and the guidelines that have already been given to the fire districts.
So assuming everybody has a copy or somehow can look at this proposed evaluation criteria, does anybody have any general questions about it, first of all? I don't see any hands raised. I want to suggest that we just go through the items one by one, and Barb can answer any questions or provide a little additional explanation for each of the items, if that sounds okay with everybody. I see some thumbs up and heads nodding. So you want to just start with number one there? Does the request meet the criteria? Any particular explanation for that, Barb? Or
I went through all of the specific questions or the various there was a list of about 5 things that it had to make, but none of them, more of it was informational to the fire districts. For instance, there are no this is the only one that I think we have to evaluate, is whether the request is sort of a one-time paid for expense. And that's a pretty big one, because I got, people that were asking whether there were, we could fund a 10-year truck for 10-year payments on a big piece of equipment. And that's not something that we could do. So I think the only thing that really sort of was a yes or no go forward was this one question here. The other things were things like, if you get a grant in 1 year, you cannot apply the next year, or you won't get a grant the next year. but this is the very first cycle. So we don't
Right.
have any precedent to work on.
Rick, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yes, I was simply going to comment that indeed, if you are granted money this year, you can't apply next year. But Barb just said that.
Okay. So does anybody have any other questions on the yes, no stuff? Or any comments? Yes, Kate.
I guess my preference would be to not have yes, no questions. I feel like I'm not sure what the point is, because if they say no, or then we're not moving them forward. I guess I'm just not sure what the intention is there for that. Like, I understand below the rubric scoring, but yes, no would kind of indicate, like, if you get a no, then you would not be moved forward.
And I think that is actually the point, is that
Okay.
if a request doesn't meet those yes, no, well, some of them though,
They're a little too vague, I think, to do that, if that makes sense. They're a little too gray.
Are there any
But-
specific ones that you think are big, or all of them, or?
Kate?
I don't have an answer right now. I need to reread
Okay.
them. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Being put on the spot.
Okay. And Doris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Actually, on number 3, does the organization show financial and operational stability through their application? And I didn't dive into this enough. Are they going to be submitting like company financials or tax? I mean, how in depth are we looking at this?
not terribly in depth. They are invited to share their annual report. They have to provide their budget and a certain question specific to how that budget is spent. But not to the degree that we're going to be looking into whether they, are in the red ever, or if they have reserves and that kind of thing.
Got it. Okay.
So, Kate, Juliet?
Yeah, I think to Kate's point, maybe number 3 is one that's a little looser and a little harder to just answer yes or no, because it involves some degree of judgment on what is financial and operational sustainability. And that might require some definition, or at least an agreement among us about what that means.
I'm just taking notes at this point, so.
Okay. Rick, did you just raise your hand?
I did, and it is still raised. My question comes to numbers 4 and 5. So it seems as if someone marks yes to those, suddenly they are enhanced, they are encouraged and prioritized. Does that get them a silver star or a gold star on their application?
If I could just jump in here for a second, I think the committee could look at those either way. They could just look at it as that those don't really impact a score so much as they just give an idea that if the prioritization is that there is cooperative, that cooperation is encouraged, then it's helpful to know that a grant fits into that. But but because there's no numerical scoring, it doesn't really impact the overall score. But
Well, should
but
it?
given that those are the things that the first round is supposed to sort of address, it's, I think, plausible to ask whether that application follows those features or not. But it doesn't disqualify anybody.
Ben?
I mean, just the general thought here. So it sounds like the goal of these sort of initial binary questions are to maybe qualify, you know, whether this is something that meets the overarching criteria. Barb's going to say, well, we don't necessarily have to veto someone based off of these, but the idea is things like, is this a multi-year grant or a single year grant? Like things like that are initial qualifiers that you know, save us time, or is this a grant worth reviewing? I think at that point. And I think what Rick and Kate are both saying is that if these are things that you play a role, like should there be weighting on these, and is there in between the yes and no's that, you know, that these should be scored on with these criteria, or are these just qualifiers here? And I think
Okay.
Barb finished her last statement by saying that they shouldn't just be qualifiers.
Mm-hmm. Dolores, were you waiting to? Doris? Okay, your hand's raised. Kate?
I would suggest that we leave 1 and 2 as yes, no, and 3, 4, and 5 be on the same scale. I think those are the subjective ones, and it'd be more helpful to know to what degree there's collaboration or what degree they're fiscally responsible, perceived from their financials, that kind of thing.
Others agree? I see heads nodding.
So if I'm hearing correctly, the 1 and 2 will stay up in the yes, no responses, and 3, 4, 5 will come down into the rankings.
Yes.
And then there was some question as to whether 3 was obtained, you know, was it to be, whether that one should be left in at all, whether you'll be able to come up with a ranking on that based on what we've asked for.
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Go ahead, Kate.
I was going to suggest, because these are for the bigger orgs, they're going to have like a nice financial statement from their accountant. I think we should leave it in for this one and see what we get. But I think we should consider removing it for the second round, because those are going to be the smaller orgs that aren't going to have necessarily like audited financials or financial letters.
And I'm just jumping in on this one. I mean, I think the question on this one where I get a little bit confused is this so we can make sure that this is, you know, not working capital, and that the organization stands on its own 2 feet and it's being used towards capital expenditures? You know, exactly what is it that we're looking for on the financial and operation stability? And I agree with Kate, if you get audited financials or whatnot, they're going to be slick and look great, versus a nonprofit that's showing you some statements they put together. It's going to be vastly different on that. So I think we really need to dial in what we're looking for in that piece.
But I think that having slick financial statements and showing sustainability is 2 very different things. Because one is about management of the money, savings, plan for the future, plans to stay relevant and be sustainable. So I think there's a lot that goes in there.
Ben, did you have something to say?
Just anecdotal that I think of the fire districts that this is open to, maybe half are all volunteer or mostly volunteer and don't have an accountant and don't have slick financials, and half might. So I think that it's we just keep that in mind as we see this, and I think it's appropriate to ask, and just for us to realize that we might see a range in response to that question. That's all.
Okay. And Barb, I think you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add on to what Ben was saying. One thing we have to do is kind of be conscious of the fact that higher funded agencies are going to be able to have grant writers. They're going to have nice annual reports. They all volunteer staff. We're just not going to have those resources. So we have to find a way that we can evaluate this question without being biased towards you know, those with more resources than not. It may be that this question could be reframed to be something just along the lines of, you know, do you believe that this money will be used responsibly based on the criteria, the grant application, or something like that? But open to any suggestions. It's just standard. We usually ask a question about how we feel an organization stands in terms of you know, its ability to receive money and use it in the appropriate manner.
Mhm. Rick?
Yes, I just want to add on to what Ben and Barb were saying. You know, there are districts who have a lot of land, but not necessarily a lot of very expensive houses that generate mill levy. So there are differently funded agencies out there. And I would hope that we are trying to help those agencies that may not be able to buy the best and brightest out of their own coffers.
I agree. Kate?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that, you know, what we're really going to get from a balance sheet is that we're going to see, you know, how liquid they are, what they have in terms of like actual assets. So I think it's a good thing to get. I did want to ask Barb, like, what is the reporting? Because these will be restricted grants, so they can't use it for whatever they want, is my understanding. And they're going to have to report back to us on how they use that and potentially show receipts. So really, we're just looking for solvency in organizations, an organization that's not going to go under and with our money with it. Is that correct, Barb?
Yes.
With the
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a correct assessment. And because these are very known public agencies, we're in a little different position. As I say, as someone said, when we get to the second round, and we'll be entertaining a much wider net and some unknown agencies to a lot of us, it'll be a little bit different, but you know, most of these have to provide their financials to the public anyway, because not all, but many of them do have some level of a mill levy or some sort of property tax or sales tax funding.
So I have a question, Barb, based on what Kate said. Our agencies where we award them money, are they going to be reporting back and how and where they spend it?
Yes, in fact,
and if they do, who's going to be following up with that?
So that will be my role.
Okay.
The county attorneys are working on standards of reporting that will be available probably at the beginning of the new year. But at the very least, we would require receipts, probably a quick, you know, a memo essentially that says this is what we used it for. Here's what we bought. Thank you very much. You know, but we're not going to put a whole lot of reporting onus on the fire districts, but it will be enough to ensure that the money is being used as we hope it will be.
Okay. It's partly because I hadn't thought through that second part.
Yeah, we're still working on the official reporting details, but there will be reporting requirements. Okay,
so what I'm hearing is we leave the first number 1 and number 2 in, and probably number 3 at some maybe fairly relaxed level, because in the future, some of the smaller departments and organizations asking for money may not have a lot of profit and loss statements or whatever, but they should be able to at least give us some idea of where they're spending money and where they plan on spending money. And the last 2, 4, and 5 will turn into rankings.
3, 4, and 5, right?
Yeah, 3, 4, and 5. Sorry.
No problem. Does the sort of non-applicable low, medium, high work for those? Is there a different sort of level of ranking that, you know, 1 to a 4, 1 to a 5? As I was putting these together, 5 seemed just a little too many, because I'm not sure we're going to have the nitty gritty to be able to discern whether a 3 or a 4 is that much different. So I started off with sort of either not applicable or insufficient. and then low, medium, and high, but I'm completely open to suggestions to change that.
I rather like the critical or essential.
Do you like that part? It didn't
Yeah.
seem to fit for all of them, but if we
Mhm.
want to be consistent, we could put it in all.
Other thoughts?
I like the numbers because then I can sort them. Like I want to be able to come and say like, here's my 20th first percentile and my 50th percentile. You know what I mean? I like that, but I'm happy to be overruled.
I'm just going to for a point of clarification. So you will be putting in a number. You'll be
Yeah.
putting in a 3 or 4, but you're saying you like that. That's more of a guide to help people.
Right, but I use this when I'm like interviewing people for jobs or like evaluating things in this way, and it just helps you like begin to sort things right into your you it might not be like where you absolutely land, but it's just nice to have to be quantitative on some level, and you can be like, well, at the end of the day, this like actually scored slightly higher in my evaluation.
So are you saying leave it as is, or are you suggesting a change?
I would say leave it. I like it how it is, but I'm happy to be vetoed.
I like it how it is too, but what do others think?
I guess
Where's-
my only, sorry, I just jumped in.
It's okay.
I would like just to keep, for me, keeping the responses the same. So if we have 1 through 5 for, 6, 7, or whatever it is, 6, 7, 8, or 6, 7, and then we only have 1 through 4 for 8, 9, and 10. I would like to keep the responses the same. That's my only comment, but I'm fine how it is too. It's not imperative.
Doris? That's what you just said. Others? Rick?
My only concern is if we use the same scoring on each, then we may have to weight the different questions. For instance, number 10 may not have the same power or impact as number 8, and I'm not sure exactly how we would do that.
So I think that having the same scale for each, a 1 through 5 in each category, makes things uniform, and then we can have slight multipliers on different items. Maybe item 6 is a 1.2 multiplier on that, and the rest are 1s or whatever that exactly looks like. But I think that each individual one having its own 1 through 5 same scale makes it easy to then when we get to that next step.
Rick likes that idea.
Do you want to change the labels?
My impression is that the labels are good. I think that what Dennis was originally saying is the category 5 critical
Got
essential
it.
is good to have, but you kind of, for us as reviewers, that's kind of reserved for that A++ level grant when you're reading it. Like most of these, I think, when you're reviewing scores, ends up being 3 or 4s, and you save that 5 for like, wow, this grant really stood out to me, and kind of having that in your pocket for all categories is a good tool to have to help a grant stand out in our eyes.
Thanks for that clarification. So in my notes, I just added the same scale to each one of the questions.
Okay, and do we want to weight some questions different than others? I'm thinking it's going to start making it really complicated if we do that.
And one suggestion I might have along those is that when you look at the numbers, the rolled up numbers, if things are all kind of in the same group, then maybe you can have that discussion and say, okay, we're going to have to figure out a way to differentiate these a little bit more.
Mhm.
And then you could later, at the first grant review cycle, say, what can we do to kind of weight these? But you might find that just going through the original scoring does a lot of that work for you.
Juliet?
Could we possibly have two different sets of rankings? So having account for 3, 4, and 5, which seem like there still are sort of qualifying questions for whether the grant is within the criteria that were set out, and then a ranking for 6 through 10. So we would have, in a way, two different totals. One that's based solely on the grant qualifies, and B, how do we weigh it against other proposals?
Juliet, there's quite an echo to your
Yeah.
microphone. It's a little bit hard to follow. I don't know if you have two devices on or.
Nope.
Okay.
I think to summarize what Juliet said, so we have two sets of rankings, one to the first qualifier criteria, and then a grant also gets ranked by its scoreable criteria in the later half. Is that the correct assessment? Okay.
Okay, I'm not sure I still understood that, Ben.
Yeah, so my interpretation is, and I've done this for candidates applying for positions. Yeah, you score them in different categories and look at, the total score is a good indicator, but then you can look at in individual categories what their qualifications are. So if we have rankings for the qualifier questions, kind of reserved separately, and then the total rank, and then the ranking for the 1 through 5 criteria kind of separate. So you have an overall picture of a grant from its overall score, and then if you want to break it down, you can look at how it's scored in the two different areas: the criteria questions, and then the scoring questions.
Okay. Makes sense, Barb?
I guess, are you saying, because they're already divided, so you've got
Yeah.
kind of the two criteria, the ones that sort of make it or break it, the first two that indicate whether the grant is, in the right pool, and then everything else ranked. I guess I'm not understanding the nuance of the difference. I mean, do you want to divide? Because now we have 8 questions that all have to get a number assigned per grant application. Do we want to keep that number, reduce that number? And again, they were just taken from questions on the application themselves. So almost each one of those represents an answer to a specific question that we ask the fire districts. We do, as I say, we've had good success with this model. And we all know that individuals will rank. Some people are very hard graders, some people are easy graders. I just went through a big process like this in our housing and human services areas, and the main thing was that people kind of score consistently across the board. And the application itself didn't prioritize or weight any of these questions. the committee is certainly welcome to entertain that and to do that. Right now, they all kind of have an equal basis to the question.
Well, I'll say that my inclination is to just keep them all equal. And if we get down to the point where we're discussing whether we should give money to agency A or agency B, we might go into more detail and looking at how specific things were ranked or how we thought they should be ranked. But I'd like to keep it fairly simple.
Yeah, I think you said that very succinctly. It's like some of these. So again, we don't know. We may have enough money to cover all the grants. We can pretty much assume we'll probably have more requests than we do have money available. And so at that point, there are a few of these questions that will give a priority to people who either it's like number 4 talks about whether it's a cooperative or cross age. That's not necessary, but if somebody did put in a grant that collaborates with their neighbor, they would get a higher score there. So that can be problematic if the committee doesn't want to give extra credit to that. So there are a few, I'd say. The other one, number 8, demonstrates positive fiscal impact. That's kind of a repeat of the one above.
And 9 is kind of a repeat of the collaboration.
It is. So maybe those two aren't necessary, or they could be combined.
Kind of think we would combine them. Juliet?
I think I see a difference between 4 and 9 because 4 is really about, is it a proposal where multiple agencies are actually coming together? And to me, 9 is just about an agency not doing their own thing that's not replicable, not standardizable, that nobody else in the county will be able to use or be proficient with. So I do see a distinction. I agree it's subtle, but I don't think it's exactly the same thing.
I don't disagree. I do know that in a lot of rural mountain agencies, there are one department may have a piece of equipment that they use throughout the neighboring districts, and another will also have a different piece of equipment that might be used maybe for extraction, for rescue, for overturned vehicles. And encouraging collaboration is great. I don't know that it's the same as the earlier one, but I do know that things that encourage departments to work together always works to everyone's benefit.
So we'll leave 8 and 9 in there?
Sounds like at least 9. I'm not sure 8 has been discussed. I think this one was more nitty gritty to the grant itself. The first question was about the agency solvency and its sort of financial status. And then this is about, if they're asking for a piece of equipment, do they show that they can maintain that equipment in future years? Because these grants cannot be encumbered by future maintenance. So
Right.
The idea was, if you give somebody something, can they also afford to continue to use that and keep it up?
Yeah, Ben.
Yeah, I just was going to say, I think that clarification that Barb provides is helpful. I think that one is from an agency standpoint, is this an agency that is behind on their finances and need just money to cover their basic operating expenses. And then the question in here that when we assess this will be, this question is assessing the grant. Is this paying for a one-time expense for this department, or is it going to create something that requires unreasonable upkeep? So I think Barb's point here is logical, and I think with that I would keep 8 in.
Other comments? So if I can summarize, and I'll probably screw something up, so don't hesitate to say something, but we'll leave 1 through 5 in for all of the rankings, and we'll keep 8 and 9 in. Is that your understanding, Barb?
That's what I have currently. I don't know if
Okay.
this addresses what Juliet was first bringing to the table. I still don't fully understand, I think, what that proposal was.
It's okay. I think we can keep it as is.
Okay.
I mean, the committee could decide that, you know, something really is a priority and you pull that question out when you go about your deliberations, you know. If it becomes unclear how to move forward, there might have to be some future discussions about moving and prioritizing some of those questions.
And I do anticipate, as we review some of the request and so forth, we'll probably make some adjustments to how we evaluate things as we learn more.
Exactly. And I mean, this is throwing a lot on your shoulders because this is the very first time. And so we know there are going to be lessons learned, things that carry forward to future rounds. I think the goal here is to do our best given this brand new terrain, and to you know, work a little bit on intuition in terms of what makes sense, where we don't have clear precedent or answers to go forward with. In my experience, ranking like this usually gives a pretty good picture. It gives you something to work with, and some of those pieces become more obvious once you have your scores in front of you. That it's hard to anticipate right now how this is all going to turn out. But this follows the application. It shows a little bit of priority to those areas that we've already said we're going to be prioritized or encouraged. So it does give a little bit of weighting towards grants that could be beneficial to other agencies or that collaborate. Beyond that, though, it kind of leaves everything else on a level playing field.
Does anybody have any other comments, or are we all okay with what we've discussed? I would say we could vote on it, but it really would be helpful to have it all in front of us first. So,
do you want me to put it up? I can certainly share the screen and we can scroll through it. Maybe that would be helpful at this point.
yeah, let's do that.
Let me do that. Oops, I picked the wrong thing. Okay, can you all see the?
I can see it.
Okay. Let me just pull it over onto my other screen here. So what we decided, and this is beneficial for anybody watching who hasn't had to see this at all yet, is that each of the members, when they get the package presented to them on Friday of all of the different grant applications, and I'm going to put this all into a spreadsheet so that the numbers will add up and all that. We just wanted to get the verbiage correct tonight. But what we will do is we will start with 2 yes or no responses, because these 2 questions are critical to know whether the grant in general qualifies under the guidelines. And so the first one is, does the request meet the criteria that it's a one-time grant only, no multi-year or ongoing? And does it serve one or more of the following purposes? So if we can answer yes to all of those, then the grant moves forward into, or the application moves forward into these remaining 8 questions. All of them will be ranked on a 1 to a 5 scale. The words are more to guide each of the members into kind of where they think their numerical ranking falls, but the actual response will be a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for each one. These questions in general, they mirror the questions on the application itself. So we are ranking and grading based on what specific questions that we asked each of the grant applicants to just make sure you all can see what I'm looking at. And that once we have all of that in a spreadsheet, which we'll have prior to the next meeting, I will bring that spreadsheet back. I'll present it to the committee members, and then it'll be up to all of you then to sort of look at the patterns based on these questions, based on the numerical rankings. There's many ways you can go about grouping, scoring, essentially just figuring out kind of which grants rise to the top, which ones fall to the closer to the bottom. And at the same time, one of the things that we've offered is that you don't necessarily have to grant the full amount or nothing at all. And some of these things can't be reduced in cost because a piece of equipment costs X amount, you either buy it or you don't. But some things could be scaled. You know, if somebody asks for 10 full, uniforms for volunteers, maybe 8 could be approved or something like that. So you are going to have a lot of nuances to deal with as you review the numbers, but there's ways that you could accommodate grant requests beyond just, you cut it off at a certain number. And so I guess the question back to all of you and to Dennis is, will these questions get you at least to a point where you feel pretty comfortable that you've evaluated each application according to the guidelines and that it gives you what you need to then shuffle it around and evaluate them further?
In my opinion, the answer to that question is yes. Rick, you have a comment?
I'm still a little confused and I apologize. So for instance, on number 3, an organization showing financial and operational sustainability, 2 points come to mind. The first is if it's a multi-agency request, say all the chiefs of all the fire departments as a whole, yes, it's going to look great. It's going to look amazing. Whereas a smaller agency that's possibly underfunded may not look as good. So how do we mitigate that?
It's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, sir, I don't know as though I have a good answer other than when we get down to looking at one request versus another one, we're going to have to go into some detail occasionally on how we ranked certain of these criteria. I don't know. That is, I'm not sure there's a real good, simple black and white answer.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the example given earlier of, the multi-agencies all requesting radios, there are a number of agencies that can easily afford those radios and a number of agencies that easily cannot.
Mm-hmm. Doris?
Is there any opportunity after we review to go back and ask any clarifying questions to the applicants at all?
Generally, no. And the reason being that in the legal counsel I've gotten is that if you ask a question of one, you have to ask of all. And it would seem in this case, you're trying to clarify about a specific grant. I will seek an answer to that. Generally, I think what the legal counsel would say is that the applicant has an opportunity to sell their idea as best as they can, and it's kind of on them to do that in a way where you don't have to go back and ask questions. But this committee, well, let me look into that, because I think there are other committees that ask every applicant to spend 5-10 minutes just discussing, going back and forth a little bit. But I think the general rule is you either have to do it for all of them or none of them. But I'll ask our legal counsel and get back to you with an answer.
Welcome back, Doug.
Thanks.
You get a call?
Yeah.
So I want to suggest at this point that we go with what Barbara's put together for this first grant review and learn from it, and then plan on making adjustments maybe in our January meeting or something after we get through the first cycle. Is that acceptable to everybody? I see some thumbs up, and a head nodding. Do we need a vote on this, Barb, or is that adequate?
That's adequate, unless you want to ask one more time if there's a dissenting opinion and it wants to keep it going, keep the discussion going.
Is there a dissenting opinion?
Okay,
I don't see any hands.
great, thank you. Well, I will go ahead and put this into more of a spreadsheet form and get that out to you. And again, as I think you just underscored, we will need to adjust as we go forward and do other rounds, but unless there's something really missing or left out of this first attempt, we'll go forward with what we have.
The next thing on the agenda is 2024 meeting dates.
Yeah, so let me just see if this works. I've actually not used the poll before. Are you able to vote on these as participants? I see it showed up. Or can you just see?
It says host and panelists cannot.
You can't vote, so it's just for the watchers. Okay, let's then just look at these. Let's go off camera for five minutes. If you can look at those dates, if you need to take a quick break. But if you can look at those dates in your calendar and just put in the chat. So the chat is what we can see as the panelists. What dates might work for you? So if you could pick one in January and one in February, or multiples in either, but the idea is that we will, as a group, pick one in January and one in February. And if those don't work, what we'll have to do is a doodle poll outside of the meeting. but why don't we come back at 7:15?
Hey,
Okay, we're gonna
Barb.
take a,
Go ahead.
Barb,
No, you're still here.
why am I not seeing the question or the
Do you
date?
not see it?
No, I don't.
Let me,
Sorry.
no worries. It's, I wasn't sure how this was going to work. Trying to figure out if I can just cut and paste them. I'll cut and paste them and put them in the chat.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
okay, we'll take a 4-minute break here while Barb is doing that.
Sorry, is everybody else on and I'm not hearing?
I'm on.
Okay. I'm not looking like we can find a perfect fit right now.
We have two people that aren't here at the meeting. To
And we
join.
do. Yep. And we,
It looks like everyone is good for the 2 Tuesdays, 123 and 227 of the 5 responses.
except for Doris, looks like Doris, you can't make January 23rd.
I'm sorry, I apologize, I missed that.
I did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did too. I didn't scroll up far enough to begin with.
I can confirm that. I think I'm gonna be out of town is my only concern.
Got it. I didn't provide earlier February, mostly because, well, the problem with January is that some of the holidays really do kind of usually affect the first 2 weeks. And then there's a holiday week with President Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I was trying to go beyond that one, but depending on availability for people here on the committee, we could put in other dates. So why don't I put out a doodle poll outside of the meetings? It's not really official business. It's more or less trying to figure out a time we can get you all back together. Does anyone have, would you be able to meet earlier in January? Anybody not able to meet earlier in January?
I'm not able to meet before the 20th of January.
Okay.
That makes it easy. Thanks, Dennis.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to be on vacation for about 4 weeks.
Good for you. And that's usually what we find, is that the first couple of weeks of January are difficult to schedule for people. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have a meeting in January. There will be activity. That'll be having to work on the financials, get the checks cut and all that for the grants that you decide on. So we
I
could
would
just
like
skip to. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to see us in January, or at least the first meeting in 2024, to review our criteria, our evaluation criteria, and make sure it's working.
For sure. And we'll also need to dive into deeper. I think we talked about marketing to agencies that we're not as familiar with. The fire protection districts were all known entities and easy to
Yeah.
contact. The second round, for those who are on the call, is going to be for the search and rescue volunteer organizations, which could be a very wide, a lot of organizations could apply for those. And so we'll have to do a lot more, I think, marketing, advertising, networking, to make sure those communities know that they can apply. So I think there'll be a longer time frame that we have the grant out there and available to apply for. And we'll also have to tailor the criteria more to that group. And that's
Okay.
what I'm hoping the first couple months of the year will be spent moving us in that direction.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Well, that was the last item that I have. Dennis, if you have any closing remarks or want to adjourn us. Oh, looks like, did Rick, you have your hand up?
I'd like to move that we adjourn this meeting.
Is there a second?
I got one from Ben, or yeah.
I see a couple of thumbs, Ben and Doris. So all in favor?
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much. Have a really happy and safe holiday, and look for an email from me on Friday with all the details that you'll have to go through as your homework assignment.
Thanks,
Appreciate you all
Barb.
doing that. Bye.
Bye, and thanks everybody.